Hey there. So this is a video meant to sort of summarize the year of Performance 1 in order that you will feel ready to come into Performance 2. So the first thing you need to know is that you're going to need to have a pen and paper handy. I am going to go ahead and highlight things using some titling. You will have supporting documentation. So if I reference something and you're uncertain about it, go check the supporting documentation. And then you can come back and check the video if you have any questions. So basically, Performance 1 is a class that is mostly focused on acting, although we do look into things like design and some directing and something called dramaturgy, which I will get back to a little bit later. This video is meant to take you through the 4 units of the year and then focus mostly on the last part because that is where Performance 2 begins, okay? And that is on the text. Unit 1 is on truth and authenticity. So we're investigating who you are as a person and making sure that we're not pushing or acting, but rather just coming to the table with your own emotions, physicality, and anything else that you bring from your memories of your life to sort of who you are as an actor and whatever character you're playing. The second unit is imagination and creativity. And that is a unit where we're asking you as an actor to go and play pretend, because essentially what we're doing is pretending. And to do that, we have to put our phones down. We have to think about a world, examine the world, look inside at our own ideas of how we see the world, and then bring that to basically an empty rehearsal space. The third unit is on improvisation and figuring out how to play an objective or a tactic or an action actively in a scene to make sure we're getting what we want. During that unit, we also introduce a very important acronym called GOAT. And I will come back to that acronym, but I want to make sure that you write down GOTE and make sure that you understand what that means. And our final unit is on investigating the text, okay? I, as a teacher, am very much invested in looking at a script and knowing that everything we need to know pretty much, once we've figured out who we are as actors in all those first few units, that where Performance 2 is starting, now that you know how to be truthful, be creative and innovative and thoughtful, and also how to get what you want, basics of acting theory, that really everything else you need to know is in that text, okay? So that's really where we start with Performance 2, is looking at the text and how to read a text and how to understand the story of a text. And when I say a text, I mean a script. And understanding what that means as performers, but maybe directors, designers. I have kids starting in Perf 1 that end up going on to college and master's programs to study design or directing or filmmaking or whatever. Okay, so let's get started. Our first unit is on truth and authenticity. I'm not necessarily going to detail for you the projects that we go through in the year, but there are some projects that I'm going to want you to recreate. And this is going to be one of them, okay? So I'm sending along a digital story 2-day curriculum. And I would like you to work your way through this. And I'm not going to go too much into detail, but this is because it's all explained in that document. But this is an exercise that's meant for me to get to know you. I'm asking you to write about something that might be deep-seated or a memory that you have, and then you're gonna put that on film and you're gonna support it with photos or video or sound so it becomes a very theatrical, filmic experience, and you're gonna send that to me, okay? And I make all my students, I give all my students the opportunity, I don't make them, in the beginning of the year so that by the time you're a senior, I know you really well, I can go back and it's fun. We look at that my first sort of exposure to who you were. But really what we're looking at as actors is making sure that we understand who we are, right? That we understand our truth and that that's what we bring at the very beginning. So if you come into a scene, for instance, or you come into a rehearsal or an audition, and you're already acting, you're already playing someone who's not you and it's fake and we don't believe it, then that's a very bad start. So that's why we start here, okay? Authenticity in acting involves being real on stage. In other words, I can tell when you're pushing, I can tell when I'm pushing, I can tell when it's fake, I can tell when it seems like a person is like overacting a scene, you might have heard it as, right? So the second project of the year is called the private moment exercise, which sounds really easy. By the way, I'm not going to have you do this. but you might want to try it out on your own just for fun, have your family be your audience, is to try to recreate 4 minutes of your life as authentically as possible, without feeling like you have to push. Just knowing there's an audience there and just doing something. So kids will come in, you can't use props, you can't fake anything. So kids recreate their room in the flex, right? They'll bring in a backpack full of stuff, and that's a hairbrush and a phone and your makeup and a mirror and all of this stuff, and you create this little play for us. There's no talking unless, rarely, like I'll allow you to have like your mother say something from, off somewhere else in the house, and you might respond with, yes, I'm coming, but no more than that, right? Because that means we're faking dialogue if you start like listening to a person who's not there. But anyway, it's an opportunity for you to figure out how it feels to be on stage for 4 minutes and have someone watching you without pushing. That's the point of the exercise. It's a 100-year-old exercise from the Moscow Art Theater. And it still exists today to get actors to understand it. I don't really need to push very hard. I don't need to act. I can just do. Okay, great. So once we understand that, coming out of Unit 1, Unit 2 we're moving on to is imagination and creativity. And this is a unit where I'm asking you really to play. We start with what's called a guided imagination, where I'm taking you into a world that is all in your mind, but you're trying to create it, right, using your senses. So I'm asking you to exist in a black box theater, but really sort of create the world around you by feeling it, by experiencing it, by how you interact with it. It's as simple as, is it cluttered? Are you cold? How does your room look? Right? You're imagining all of this, and yet it's going to make your scene more interesting, right? We also talk a lot during this time about, as actors, we need to watch other people, right? And we need to sort of understand how humans interact with each other, right? Why do people behave the way they do? What's the power structure of a scene? Sit at lunch and watch the strange way that people interact with each other regarding power, humor, whether people are being mean to each other or people are hiding something, or these are all things that you as actors, so it's sort of like going to a museum and studying people, and then I'm asking you to sort of the imagination part of it is to be able to play pretend, to play dress up, to understand that you're creating this whole world, right? And that's before we get into interacting on a stage with each other, because then you know that you're going to bring, in our next unit, and we get into improvisation, which I'll talk about in a moment, that you're going to bring, number one, authenticity, your sense of self, and the fact that you are able to create a whole world energetically and you're excited about it and you know exactly where you are and what's going on and what's just happened. We talk about the moment before. What's just happened? Are you feeling anxious? Is it hot outside? Are you out of breath? Whatever. You're creating this whole world. What does the night sky look like, right? How do you talk to someone in a room when it's 2 a.m. and you're at a sleepover? Versus when you are having to shout at them across a crowded room. You have to create all of this, and you create all of this for the audience. Then we move on into improvisation, where I'm giving you sort of like words to use, but they're words that you're making up in the moment. They're not a script yet. And arguably this is easier because it's coming out of your brain, okay? And this brings me around to a very important facet of this craft that you'll hear me say 50,000 times probably if you stay in my program, which is that the hardest part of acting is and will always be, no matter if you're starting out or if you have a master's degree or you've done 1 million shows or you've done 2, is how do I make these words and thoughts and feelings seem like they're coming out of my brain and out of my mouth as if for the first time? And how do I listen to others' lines or events or things happening around me as if for the first time, right? And as we know, in theater, we're doing many shows in a week. Broadway's doing 8 to 12. If you're doing film, you're shooting a scene anywhere from 8 to 12 times, depending on different camera angles. So it's that creation of making it seem real. And that's why we start with improvisation. It's a little easier. So a lot of these improvs, they're not funny. They're not maybe some of the games that you played in middle school. They're improvs that get into real situations. So usually what I'm doing is I'm giving you what we call This is the part of the year where we introduce the idea of given circumstances. You'll hear me use that a lot. What that means is, as an actor, you have several things that you know. So in the improvisations, I'll give an actor the following given circumstances. So you are in a kitchen, you're washing dishes, you're with your mother, and you arrived home last night late past curfew. Go, right? And that might be the start of the improvisation. Or it may be as fun as, you know, I want you to start to do an impossible task that you can't do in 4 minutes, but I want you to try as hard as you can to do it together. Go, right? And that's like building a house, or, you know, like, I don't know, something you can't do in 4 minutes is another fun improvisation. And then what that's meant to do is to get you to a place that you understand, I just have to keep going. I have to keep working, and I have to keep trying to get what I want. Which brings us to the other thing that is introduced in this unit, okay, is the idea of GOAT. And GOAT is an acronym that stands for goal, other, tactic, and expectation. I'm going to break these down for you, but I want you to try to understand. And if you don't, what I'd like you to do is go investigate on the internet and find some supporting documentation. I'm not going to send you any from the internet because only you know what you're drawn to in terms of your web searches. So I'll let you sort of learn how to do that research on your own. Fairly straightforward. Goal is what you want. So as an actor, you're coming into the scene, you're coming into the play, the film, whatever it is, and you need to know what you want, because that's what's going to keep you active, okay? Other is the other person in the scene. Why is that important? Because you have to use them to get what you want. You have to make sure you're listening to whatever they're putting in your way, if they're introducing obstacles or whatever. So it's about listening. Tactics are active engagements or behaviors that you're doing to get what you want, right? So if I'm doing Romeo and Juliet and I'm Romeo and I really want Juliet to fall in love with me, there are several things I can do to get her to do that, right? I can smile a lot. That's very active. Simple as that, right? Try to get her to laugh. I'm going to lightly touch her arm. These are very active brass tacks behavioral things that you can do to get what you want, okay? Everything relates back to the G, which is goal, all right? And the last one is E, which is expectation, which essentially is asking the actor to expect to get their goal, because that brings a positive energy to the scene. So we're wanting to play positive choices. So if the scene is a very sad scene, even though it reads as sad, what I might be trying to do is to play against that, right? To look to get a hug, or to look to find humor in the scene, because that's what people do when you're trying to cover up being sad. Still very active, right? We're always wanting to be active. And this brings me to something else which you'll hear me say a lot, which a lot of Performance 1 was about this year, which is to not play quality, okay? Not play sad, not play mean, not play happy. Because that is a place of stasis. You're not doing anything. You always want to be working towards doing something. My favorite actors to watch are the ones that are just eyes open, listening, body engaged, ready to go, right? Ready to think about what they're doing next. It's an active choice. If you play sarcasm, if you play awkward, if you play whatever, then going back to the first unit of the year, it's very fake. It's very acty, right? And you may have seen this maybe in some sort of middle school classes where, you know, you have the mean guy and the you know, mean girls, right? But all of those actors in that film and musical, Mean Girls I'm referencing now, have really interesting reasons as to why they're mean, right? They think it's good for them. They think that by putting others down, they're going to get ahead. That's a positive choice. You may not think of them as positive people, but they're doing something to get what they want. This is how we get real people telling real stories, okay? And understanding that your job as the actor is to tell the story that the playwright or the screenwriter gave you. That's your job. So you have to understand the person, and you have to understand what they're doing every single moment to get what they want. Nothing more important in Perf 1 than that information, okay? So that's GOAT. So our last unit of the year, what we're doing is we're looking at the text. And so I give you a text, and I will be attaching this text. It's called Selections from We Sleep in the Bedouin Tents. It was written for us by a friend of mine who was once in your shoes and is now a professional playwright. Featured in American theater last month. It's a very cool connection we have. And this play is a play written for an acting class. So he knows exactly what I'm teaching: goal, other, tactic, expectation, how to approach a character. And so I'm going to ask you to go through the text, read the text, pick a scene that you want to work on or character that you want to work on. And while you're not going to be able to do it together, you'll be able to sort of like do the written work on it, sort of, sort of formulaically, like a math class, so that you can figure out sort of how to get to that final conclusion. Okay. So when I give you a text, right, and Perf 1 is the training ground for the beginning of Perf 2, where we will start in August with me handing you a text, and we're going to start breaking it down. So listen carefully. The first thing we're going to do is do dramaturgy on that text. And what dramaturgy is, what I refer to as dramaturgy is the ecosystem of a play. So where does the play exist in history? Who wrote it? Why? What are things about the play that we don't understand? Bedouin Tents, you'll see when you read it, is about a group of American Jewish teenagers who are going to the Holy Land to sort of like investigate what it was like to live in the West Bank, right? So if you don't know anything about that, and I mean teenager, Jewish, West Bank, all the things I just said, there are a couple characters that come out as gay in the course of the play. You have to investigate all of this stuff. So you're doing a little bit of history, a little bit of English, and kind of like an annotative style. You're looking at the play and you're figuring out everything you don't understand, and you're investigating that, right? Also attached to that dramaturgy is I want you to take a look at the play as if you could design the play, what would you want it to look like, right? And this is sort of giving you a little taste of design and direction. But it also helps you as an actor to see the play, to feel the play, to sense the play, right? So that is the first round of work we do on a play. The good news is once you understand these steps, so table work, dramaturgy and directing proposal is number 1, which I'm talking about right now. Number 2 is going to be table work and character work, okay? 3 is rehearsal. And then 4, you're in performance. Once you understand that step-by-step process, this is how professionals work. It doesn't change for 4 years and how often do your career. This is where I started, and this is what I still do on a text. So I mentioned number 2 is table work. Table work is where you're sitting around with your partner and you're figuring out, for instance, and this is supporting documentation as well that is sent to you in that packet, table work and character questionnaire. At the top of that document, there's 6 or 7 steps that I'm asking you to go through. What's the story of the play? What are major events of the play? So before we get too far into like acting, we're going to be looking at just the things that make people want to come see this story, right? Because they're not coming to see you necessarily unless you're a super top celebrity. They're coming to see a story. So you need to understand your place in that story. So understanding the story, understanding events, you might start thinking about major tactics that your character is playing through the course of the play. And then the bottom half of that is looking at character, okay? We don't spend a lot of time on character. We get more into that into Perf 2, so you didn't miss a lot on that. But this worksheet is meant for you to take a character like Zach or Henry or Katie or Amelia in Bedouin Tents and just take a stab at answering those questions. Sorry, something just fell in my office. And I'm not stopping and re-recording, so we'll deal with that. Your goal is to, after reading the play, to sort of like make some assumptions on them, remembering that we're not playing them as mean people or dumb people or smart people. We're playing aspects of their character. Answer these questions in this worksheet to sort of help you with that. You might also think about, how do they stand? How do they walk? How do they sit? We do that in class. But since you missed that, right? Like, how do you move about your room? How do you wear your hair? What do you wear? What's on your body? Like, what kind of clothes do you wear? These are all aspects of character that we can tell by just looking around us, right? Who these people are and what makes them real humans, okay? Not a caricature. The next step is getting the scene up on its feet. And this is the part of the class where I talk a lot about physical impulse. You may have heard the term blocking before, so where you move on a stage. And so if you haven't, that's what it is. And when we block a scene, typically professionally, a director will block a scene. They'll say, I want you to move here, I want you to kneel here, I want you to sit and go and talk to them there, whatever. We don't do that in performance classes. What I train you to do is to move on the stage, stand on the stage, cross away, whatever, out of the rehearsal process. And I ask you to do that step by step based on physical impulse. So even if you're not doing this, it's important that you understand the difference, right? I walk around and I would tell your classmates every week last year, every single script that we work on, stop talking about blocking, because they'd sit there and they'd be like, I don't know, what do you think? Should we start on the couch and then you go over here and then I go over? Stop. Do you ever plan your day that way? No, we're trying to recreate like what would happen if these moments actually happened moment by moment by moment. So what I ask you to do is to shut up, get on your feet, get that scene, right? And we work in beats. This goes back to the table work portion. You'll see that in the documentation. We work in beats, and we're going to work beat one. And during beat one, we're going to say, I don't know, what do I do in this moment? And you're going to ask me, and I'm going to say, I don't know, what do you feel like doing? And it's a process, and it gets easier, and you get better at it. And you're going to try something, and you're going to hate it, and you're going to go, sorry. So like if two of you were doing a scene, you say, sorry, partner, I'm just going to take that back. Do you mind? Sorry. And you don't need to talk about it or apologize or say you're sorry. If you watch a professional rehearsal, this is how actors work. And this is how you create a real person in a real environment who moves in a real way, connected to language. So that's what you're learning in that process. And then really after that, we're getting into details like listening, eye contact, right? How much are you really making sure that you're listening to your partner's lines? We talk about things like the line cue, so that's when it's time for my line, but also like what's called an emotional cue. If you listen to conversation, people don't just let each other finish and then start talking again. They get the idea to speak in the middle of the line. So we talk about that. How can you be actively listening, right? A lot of beginning actors will just look at their laps or look at their script, and I ask you to get off book quite quickly, learn your lines so that you're not looking at your book, so that you're listening, right? Script analysis, I'm sending you back into the text, right? And finding out more, finding out what else can I dig out of this? So you're not just like running the scene and being like, okay, we're good. It's work, okay? If that's one thing you learn out of Perf 1 is that this is hard work. And if you love it, it's fun. This is what I've chosen to do with my life, both doing it on stage, but also doing it on film, teaching it, directing it. And so you want to have that energy. You want to bring that to the table. You want to bring that into Perf 2. Understanding all of these concepts that I've brought up, understanding all of the major terminology that I've brought up, understanding what your peers went through, but also continuing your own research. Read the play 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Go in depth on your directing proposal. Go in depth on your character worksheet. This summer, I can't make you do that, right? But I am going to ask you to turn some things into me. You're going to submit your digital story. You are going to submit that full packet of documentation for a scene. So that means your dramaturgy and directing proposal, okay? And then I'm going to ask you to do your table work worksheet and your character worksheet, and those will be turned into me. And that will show me that you at least understand how to approach a text, so that even though I haven't given you feedback yet on your work, when I do give you feedback, you'll have the context for where you need to go back and do more work. So I really hope this has been informative. I know it's been long, but it's shorter than a class. It's only like 20 minutes. And I invite you to go check out the documentation, check out the script that I'll send along, and then come back and watch this video again, because you'll understand things differently. Any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And I really hope and look forward to the fact that you will take this seriously, that you will do the work, and that when we talk again, you can show me that you understand it, and we'll get you into Perf 2. Hope to see you there.